Swisher Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Finally, we made it happen. A couple of cancellations on me, on you, but we made it happen. So I'm excited to have you here.
It's been a journey, but we got here. So
exactly. That's all that matters is this moment right now.
Absolutely.
So tell those who are listening the state that you're in and how long you've been in the business and the name of your shop.
Sure. I'm owner operator of Arlington Jewelry and Pawn. I also wear the hat of president of the Illinois Pawnbrokers Association.
Awesome. And how long have you been in the business?
I've had the shop for 20 years.
Nice.
So been in and around the business for a lot longer than that, but have this shop for 20 years. Yeah.
So give us a brief history. You've had the shop for 20 years. Were you in pawn before that?
So I came to pawn in a kind of odd fashion, but when I got out of high school, I went into the steel mills in Gary, Indiana. I worked for U.S. Steel for 13 years. During that time, my uncle had a small little jewelry shop in Crown Point, Indiana, where I kind of cut my teeth in the jewelry business. And I used to buy all his scrap and then I'd repolish it and I'd actually sell it to coworkers that I worked with in the steel mills. And it was a good little sideline. And my uncle had closed the shop up and moved to Sarasota, Florida, where he opened a little pawn shop in a bank building. It was very discreet and appointment only kind of situation. And he did mostly higher end pawns, but that's where I learned the industry really. And after a few years, it became evident that I could make a living in the jewelry business. So I had quit the steel mills and did jewelry full time. And it was just a natural progression because I was a vest pocket dealer. I didn't have a location and I dealt with a lot of pawn shops, my uncles included. And so I understood the business and there was an opportunity for me to open a shop in an area that I felt was underserved. So that's what I did, and that was 20 years ago.
So you went from one medal to other medals.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. So 20 years in the business. Tell us about you've got one shop. Is that correct?
It's my chain of one. Yes.
Your chain of one. Sometimes some people don't understand this. When I go to pawn conventions and I ask, what's your goal? And they say, I want to have multiple stores. Sometimes people don't understand that having one successful shop can make you just as much money and you can have less stress than having multiple stores.
I'm a firm believer in that. I have witnessed in my area pawnbrokers' rapid expansion, and within 5 years, 2/3 of the shops that they had opened are now gone. And I think their existing shops suffered because of it. I don't think it's a measure of success. I truly don't.
What do you think? Why do you think that happens? What's lacking when people are opening more stores, when they have this big dream of having multiple locations? What's lacking in their one store at the moment that's causing that breakdown?
I personally, I think somebody told me a long time ago, when you open your second shop, it's 3 times as much work.
Yeah.
It's not twice as much. And I think that's true. And when you divide your time, I always use this analogy, right? My grandma used to make banana bread. Okay. And she'd make 4 loaves of banana bread and it was amazing. Well, around Christmas time, all she would do is, because she had so many more people wanting it and she wanted to give it to family, she would just quadruple the recipe. It never tasted as good, right? So I think that's what happens when people open multiple shops in rapid expansion. There's something lost in the recipe, right? You opened your shop, you were there, you dedicated your time, your effort to it. Now you're splitting that between 4 shops or 5 shops. And I think if you don't have the proper management structure all the way through, which most people, I don't think, comprehend how important that is.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's the recipe for disaster. Just wanting to have the shops for the sake of having them isn't a reason to have them.
You said something that I've been screaming from the rooftops for years, that in order to grow your business, you have to grow your leadership, right? And so if you want to have more stores, those who are managing those stores have to be incredible leaders. And it's not just you can't do it all. And I think that sometimes, my brother and I, we had 3 stores at one time. My uncle, my father, my grandfather had 12 stores at one time. And you're right. You open your store, it's your personality, it's your brand. And then when you kind of go to grow that, if you don't train and give the personnel that same personality, it dilutes.
Without a doubt. And it's hard because I've said this for years. This business kind of chooses you. You don't always get to choose it. You could take a manager from the local hardware store and put him in a pawn shop. He runs that hardware store perfectly. You put him in a pawn shop. That doesn't mean he's guaranteed to be a good manager in a pawn shop. It's a whole different environment, right?
So let's focus on that a little bit. What do you think it takes for somebody to run a successful pawn shop, either owning it or managing it? You talked about hardware store manager might come into a pawn shop. It might not work out. What do you think a great pawnbroker needs in order to be successful?
Wow, good question. I think, it's kind of like when you meet somebody that's really good at it, it's that first 10 seconds, right? I don't know if you've ever read the book Blink, but it's exactly that, right? You know it the minute. Well, I think that's the same when you hire somebody or when somebody goes into the pawn business. In Illinois, what happened was when at the height of hardcore pawn and Pawn Stars, we had a boom here. We had people opening pawn shops all over the place because they saw it on television. They said, I can do that. I'm exactly like that. I do a lot of garage sales. I can do that, and they're all gone. They were actually, pulled way back from those numbers originally. So I think one of the things that's most important about being in the pawn business is you have to understand its true essence, right? It's to help people. You have to have that mentality. You have to have that in your DNA that says, this isn't just a cash cow. I'm not just going to take money out of it. It's not just that. If you go into it with that mentality, I think you're going to fail. If you go into it with, it's a give and take relationship, right? I'm here because of them and my customers are here because of me. And I think you have to go into it with that mentality. And if you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure.
I love that. Looking back at the successful pawnbrokers I've had on the podcast, it's always the mission to help people, right? Yes, we're capitalists. We want to make money. We don't have nonprofits, but at the end of the day, it's about helping the customer. It's about helping the team members, the crew. And when you come from that place of empathy, I think that's where the success comes in. So well said.
So I did a little project here in Illinois last year. We traveled from the northern part of the state to little southern central of Illinois, and we visited different pawn shops. And I took a videographer with me, and we did testimonials per se for customers in these shops. And it's funny because it was a broken record from the customers. Everybody said the same thing. Geographically, it didn't matter. The level of store didn't matter. The size of the shop didn't matter. They all said the same thing. This is my pawn shop, and these people treat me with respect. The single message that was given from everybody we interviewed, that was one of the things they all said. And I think that it's so important to comprehend that when those people walk through the door and they're probably not in the best mood, because let's face it, right? Nobody wants to be getting money from somebody else. Nobody wants to be in that position, right? And if they're treated with respect, and if everybody knows that you need to make money to keep the place open. That's not a mystery. The customers understand that. They appreciate that fact because, whatever business they're in, they make money. But it's being treated with respect and never looked down on, right? It's not, I'm doing you a favor. As a pawnbroker, some of the worst pawnbrokers I've ever met when I was vest pocketing, I would watch interactions, right, that they would have with customers. And they would feel and they would give this vibe that, well, I'm helping you out.
Yeah,
I'm doing you a favor, right? It was always an uncomfortable moment when you see that.
You reminded me of a pawnbroker here in San Diego. May he rest in peace. He was an incredible gentleman. But he would always tell me, he's like, Yigal, when somebody pisses me off in the pawn shop, I asked them to get on their knees and speak to my microphone. And I was just like, I can't believe you said that. Like, he'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm really hard of hearing. Can you get on my knees? Can you get on your knees and speak to my microphone? It was horrible. It was like, sorry for those who are listening, but it just reminded me of that mentality, right? Like, I think that the old pawn shop mentality of like, I'm here for you, is dead and it needs to die. And my father always said, may he rest in peace. He's like, Yigal, you don't sign your checks, your customers do.
Yep.
And when you realize that, you treat them a whole different way. Yeah. And you respect them a whole different way.
I wholeheartedly believe that, listen, vest pocketing was probably one of the best things I could have done to educate myself on what I wanted my shop to be, because there's two ways of being educated. You can watch and see a mentor, which I used my uncle as a mentor. I watched his business. Even though I opened a completely different type of pawn shop, I understood what he was accomplishing and exactly how well he was running this little, he had an office in a bank building, right? It was mostly referrals, and he would do big pawns for people, and it was some amazing jewelry. And then when I'm out on the street vest pocketing, I'm being taught a different way, right? I'm being taught as to what not to do. I see these shops and they're there by happenstance. They're there because just a population density, it's almost impossible for them to fail.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, that's the case. But then you go into other little towns, or you go into shops that have, 50,000 in their town, and you watch how it's run and you see how intimate they are with their customers. And then you realize that's what I want. I don't want to just be successful because of happenstance. I want customers to come to me for generations. Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love that. And that's the case. I remember having, a customer's daughter at 12 years old, she'd come in with her, and then at 18, she'd be buying or pawning when she needed something. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the project. I think that first, let's talk about your leadership role in Illinois. And I think that what you said about the project is epic. So I want to go back to that. But how long have you been the president of Illinois? And I know that Illinois has gone through some turmoil in the last year when it, politically in the pawn spectrum. So if you can kind of just give people a synopsis of what's happened in your states.
I think I'm on my 9th year. I can't remember. I honestly don't. Listen, when I started, when I opened my shop in 2001, I joined the Illinois Pawnbrokers Association in 2002. I would go to meetings and there would literally be David Shaneman, who was the president at the time, and 3 board members. That was it. That was the entire meeting. There was nobody in attendance. So when I took over, we were right at a point where unintended circumstances, right? There was a pawnbroker who ran his shop out of a trailer down in Southern Illinois, and somebody had brought him a family heirloom, beautiful, super expensive shotgun, and the trailer had burned. And this guy is like, well, I only got like $300 on the pawn. The shotgun's worth $5,000. So there was inadequate insurance. So all politics are local. This guy out in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, goes to his local representative. His representative goes to Springfield. Next thing you know, we have 2 times the aggregate amount of pawn balance insurance requirement, right? Okay. Like that. It happened that fast. So right when I took over, we had sent letters out and said, well, if you were part of the association, you might have known that your insurance was going to double. Your requirements were going to double. Maybe you should become, a member and participate. And then we had a big surge of members, and we've been kind of keeping that same amount now. But what's baffling to me is there's 238 pawn shops in the state of Illinois. Let's say 55 of those are corporate, either cash or easy. Mm-hmm. So, we're just a little bit south of 175 shops, let's call it. And not everybody's a member. And it's baffling to me that pawnbrokers, like, historically always feel that they're an island.
Yep.
I'm an island. I know whatever happens in my town, I don't care about everybody else. Well, that's not the case. That's not the case. And we've had just recently an example of that in the middle of the night, or actually I should say very early morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. There was a piece of legislation passed that included what they call the PLPA, which is the Predatory Loan Prevention Act. And it was originally written to include payday loans, title loans, and certain types of installment loans. Well, there was a line in there that kind of says, it didn't kind of say, it says, and all other consumer loans. So
bulked it all together.
Yeah, we're just going to consider everything. So when the law had gotten passed, let's put this in perspective. It was introduced on the 11th, passed on the 13th. Unheard of. Yeah. Unheard of.
No time for you to even prep anything.
Oh, there was no reaction. It wasn't even time to react. And the best part was, it's truly the perfect storm, because we were under COVID restrictions. It was in January, so there had been January 6th in DC. So states reacted by fencing off the state capitals and putting National Guardsmen out and police out. And our lobbyists were not allowed on the State House. They're literally sitting outside on the flower, the flower pots, trying to catch lawmakers as they're walking in, because that's the only conversations we can have. Nobody's returning texts, nobody's returning phone calls. And the next thing we know, this thing's passed and we've got it dropped in our lap. And after the fact, an afterthought, they said, oh yeah, absolutely includes pawn. Even though pawn was never mentioned in the entire act, they said, well, you're covered under that one line that says
all
everybody.
Yeah.
So that's when the fight began. And we ended up with litigation. We're still involved with litigation, but we got a stay of execution. So we're operating as normal right now. And that brings me to why I did this video project.
So when you mentioned the video project, it's something I've been talking about for 7 years exactly, that I believe every association needs to go to their membership and get letters, videos from their customers, not from the store. The store does not matter, right? When you hold, 50,000 letters, let's say in California, if you get 100,000 letters from customers and you drop it in the office of the legislator's eyes are going to open and be like, holy crap, I got to take a peek at this. So tell me about the project, how you guys did it. And essentially, I don't know if you guys gave it to the legislators already, or you guys are working on it? Kind of like, what was the outcome of that project?
So, okay, first off, I think I have to say the most shocking part of doing this project was finding out that a 2-minute video is too long.
Yeah.
Like I was blown away by that. I mean, I'm 55. I'm a little old school. I can keep an attention span for 2 minutes, but apparently that's not the way it works.
It's like a 30-second TikTok. That's what they do.
Yeah, that's it. We have narrowed our attention span down to milliseconds, so it's insane. We had a PR company, and I hired a videographer, and we put a call out to members. There were a lot of gracious members, invited us out to their shops, talked to their customers, and their customers are like, yeah, let's go, or I'm ready to talk about it. Because faced with losing us, it's so detrimental to the customers. That they don't get it. And we came to the conclusion that we're in this position, and I'm speaking industry wide, not just in Illinois. We're in this position because of one thing and one thing only, and that's lack of education. Lawmakers don't know what we do. Even when they say they know what we do, they don't know what we do. Yeah. And we wanted to put this video together because you're exactly right. Nobody has sympathy for a pawn shop or a pawn shop owner. Nobody cares. Nobody. But when you hear a customer say, I need them. Like, I've been coming here for 20 years because they fill a gap that I can't fill any other way. They helped me out. And to see that on film, and to see somebody actually, just an average customer in a pawn shop, talking about their experience, it's impactful. I mean, it's truly what needs to be done for lawmakers to see. We had great experiences, a lot of laughs. Customers are a riot. They're very colorful. Yeah. It's
what I miss the most about being in a shop, for sure.
Yeah. Not no dull moments. But like I said, the thread that ran through the entire project was everybody would kind of get to the conclusion, and I would video them, and I'd say, listen, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions. I'm not steering them. Give me what you got. I don't care. How long have you been using a pawn shop? How long have you, and then people open up and they start talking about their experiences. So what do you use a pawn shop for? Oh, well, and then they go off, I buy jewelry, and then if I need to pawn something, and then you'll get this, the very detailed story. Just happened the other day. I didn't have a tool to finish a job. So I came in, I pawned my chain, I went and bought the tool, I finished the job, I got paid, I came back. And I mean, the whole scenario that in the industry we see, thousands of times that take place a day.
Yeah.
So it was that's what we were trying to reach. We were trying to get the true, real, on the ground story as to why pawns are important to the customers. And we did a limited geofenced campaign around the State House.
Nice. Smart.
And we had found that, I fought for a longer video, and everybody is going, gotta shorten it. So we're in the process now of getting, down into the 1 minute mark for the long version, and a bunch of 30-second segments, little snippets of singular questions. Well, what I like about a pawn shop is if I don't want to pick my item up, I just walk away and they sell it, and we're still good, and we those little things that politicians and lawmakers don't actually understand that take place.
Kudos to you for getting it done. I think that every state association needs to do it. needs to take the time, needs to make the investment. It was an investment for the videographers, the PR firm, your time, travel, stores, customers. But like you said, I wrote this down. I said, like, nobody cares about the pawnbroker, and it's the truth. And people want to hear about the customer. And so if you're listening to this, if you're on a board of directors of a state, if you're part of a state association, you should do this now so that you have it, as opposed to like you guys last year, poop hit the fan and it's like, let's go do this to make sure that our state legislators know what's happening.
So I think if I'm speaking to anybody, and anybody that's listening to this that's in an association or a president of association or participates in an association, here's what we have to understand. As an industry, I think we've always said, we're going to lie a little low. We're not going to draw any fire. And we've always been reactionary, right? Something happens in the industry, everybody joins, everybody throws money, everybody, helps out, and then it goes away. That's our fault. We've made a mistake. It's a tactical error.
Yeah.
We have to be very proactive in educating people in our industry. Local, state, federal, it all has to be done, because when a piece of legislation comes across the desk and a person knows nothing about the pawn industry, what's the first thing they think? A movie. It just happens, right? Yeah. You have this image in your mind that I'm going to be standing in a wife beater t-shirt that's stained, chomping on my cigar, giving you $10 for your Rolex because I know it's hot. That's the quintessential Hollywood image of a pawn shop, right?
Yeah.
So think about it. It's truly not the legislator's fault. Why would they know? If they've never needed or used a pawn, why would they know? I don't know about a lot of industries because I've never used them. It's our responsibility. It falls on our shoulders to make sure that they're educated, that they get invited to a shop. And I just had a state legislator go to a member's shop. We invited them there because it was his district. So I went with them, and our member asks this particular lawmaker, do you know about pawn shops? Yeah, absolutely. And he said, okay, how many people do you think come back and pick up their item? He's like, oh, I don't know, 5%. And at that moment, you realize
you have no idea.
They have no idea.
Yeah.
So it's our responsibility, right?
Yeah. So, and if you're, by the way, I'm going to say something that's going to hurt some people's feelings. If you're listening to the show and you are not a member of your state association, shame on you. That's my thought. You should become a member. Even if you don't agree wholeheartedly with what's going on, you should become a member, and then go fight for what you want. That's my belief, right? Because just getting the results that Kelly, you guys are fighting, and something's going to happen. Hopefully it's going to be positive. And people who sit back and they get that result without paying some money or going to war, it's like, you don't deserve the spoils. You just don't. That's my take.
You said it very kindly. I would have another another phrase for them, but kindly, putting it nicely, they're freeloaders.
Yeah.
So if you want to live your life as a freeloader, that's fine.
Yeah.
And again, if I upset somebody and I hurt somebody's feelings, tough, because this is the reality. What in your wildest dreams, if you have an organization that's fighting for your existence, right? Fighting for your business, right? Fighting for your industry, the way you make a living and you pay for your housing and send your kids to school, why wouldn't you join?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to participate? Not only that, let's think of selfish reasons. We dictate a lot of legislation that passes that pertains to the pawn industry. You don't want to be part of something. You don't want to have some say in the direction that your industry is going. It makes no sense to me.
No.
It's very short-sighted, I think,
Yeah.
But again, we go back. A lot of pawnbrokers just feel like they're an island. that
What's Kelly, what's been the hardest part? Let's talk about leadership real quick. What's been the hardest part about leading your business and leading an association?
leading my business, the hardest part is employees. I have great employees. They're very well compensated. I pay 100% of their health care.
Nice.
I make sure that, listen, when I'm not here, they're me, right? And they need to operate this business the way I do. My customers have come to expect that. Our reviews reflect that, right? So for me, the hardest part is making sure and continuing the level of excellence for our customers as far as running a shop. As the association goes, I can't even begin to tell you how many times, at least once or twice a year, I'll get a call from a pawnbroker. Never heard of them before, never been to an association meeting. And they'll say, do we have a hold time? Are we supposed to hold something? And I'm like, how long have you been in the business? 12 years. But wait a minute. I was talking to this other guy and he said, this other shop holds stuff. Do we have to hold things? I'm like, yeah, there's a whole state law about that, and it's the hardest part of being the head of an association is membership, right?
Yeah.
How do you convince somebody that you're to help them if they have no interest in being helped? I mean, you can't. Let me give you an example. Not far from here, there's a town, a few pawn shops in it. One of the pawn shops in it is a member of our association, but that's not who contacted me. A different pawn shop contacted me and said, this is happening in our town. Can you help? I said, okay. I leave on like minutes notice and I go to a city council meeting in a town that I'm not familiar with. I meet with the village attorney. I meet with the police chief. We have a great conversation. I kind of de-escalate things. They remove it from the docket, from whatever they were going to talk about, from their agenda that night in the meeting. They removed it to have a greater conversation. I facilitated, and I'm not patting myself on the back, I'm just telling you how this went. I facilitated a conversation between this pawnbroker that called me, this is the village attorney, and the police chief. We had this discussion. Things kind of came down. The pawnbroker gave a little, the village attorney gives a little, the police, and we come to a resolution. So when we're done with this, I'm leaving, and I said to this pawnbroker who had called me, and I said, hey, listen, is this proof enough why you should join the association? And my hand to God, he goes, well, like, what else do I get for it?
What?
Swear. I swear. I didn't answer.
I would have punched him in the mouth.
I didn't answer it. I turned around, walked away, never to be heard from again. You can't imagine, and
do me a favor. Afterward, tell me the name of the shop. I'm going to come after him. I'm kidding. That's insane. It's funny because here in California, when I was on the board, it's the same thing. Like, hey, what do I get? And it's just like, well, you get the fact that you can keep your doors open, right? In California, we had the CAPA, which is the California Pawnbrokers Association. They passed legislation that allows the hold period to go from 30 days to 7 days, which means that you can move merchandise 4 times as fast. And if you do the calculation, if you move the merchandise 4 times as fast, you can make 4 times the money. And people will still say, well, why should I join? Or it's too expensive to join.
Good. Yeah. It's baffling to me.
It's like F you. Like,
it's baffling. And look it, we have Illinois pawnbrokers that don't belong to the Illinois Association, but belong to the NPA.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in the NPA. To be quite frank, if it weren't for the NPA, along with, and I think this is important to say, because the corporates get bashed, right? A lot because, well, they come in, they take over, the blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever. Think of this, the NPA and one privately held multi-store chain and two publicly traded companies. We all created a coalition that was part of this lawsuit for the state. Now, granted, everybody, with the exception of the NPA, they had skin in this game, right? Because their industry, their shops would all be affected.
Yeah.
Now, everybody bashes the big corporates, but I've got pawnbrokers here that have not donated $1, have not participated one time in the association, right? It's their hide also on the line. And they still, to this day, I thought for sure that when this happened, we would have a flood of new members because so many people were caught off guard and so many people were just shocked that we got to this point without, it being super public knowledge, and they didn't understand the circumstances around it all. I thought for sure we would have a flood of new members. Didn't happen.
It's sad.
So if it weren't for the NPA, if it weren't for the corporates and the larger privately held company, we wouldn't be here because we couldn't have afforded to fight. Now, the argument will be, well, the big corporates have enough money. They've got public money. They would have fought it. Okay, so let's just think about that to its conclusion. So let's say they do fight it on their own without the IPA, without the NPA, without this other company. When there's terms of surrender, who do you think is going to set those terms?
Yeah.
Right. So it's very important for us as an industry to work together. So my point being, there are members that just belong to the NPA. The NPA is just an extension of any state association because there's nobody else out there fighting for us in DC. We're on our own. There's nobody,
yeah.
Right? So if you don't support the NPA, we're gonna go through the same things that Illinois went through, on a national level,
yeah.
And then we're really in trouble.
I want people to know that you're not a convenience store selling liquor, beer, and gum. We are very heavily regulated businesses where local and federal legislators are consistently trying to put forward laws that will, what's the best word I can use? That will cut your income significantly. And if you don't get your shit together and lead and help some way, please don't come crying. That's what I want to say. Sorry, one more thing, Kelly. And
Sure.
And even more further, when you turn around to your family and say, hey, we can no longer afford XYZ because I was an asshole and I didn't help my pawn association, that's going to be the worst feeling you will ever experience. Take it away.
Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, I think so. This is going to be, some people are really, this is going to rub some people, right?
Do it.
I think our problem is our fault. And I think we continually and we perpetuate that problem by using the word loan. Okay. I know this is like a hot spot. I've had so many conversations and arguments with people, but here's the bottom line. Payday loan, title loan, installment loan, pawn loan. What makes us different? We're just included, right? We have to realize that pawn is a completely separate beast. And we have to point that out by our own terminology, right? I have pawnbrokers that say, well, I foreclosed on loans. Oh my God, it makes my skin crawl. Foreclosure is, now in full disclosure, I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be one, but let's just talk from layman's terms. When you talk about foreclosure, it's an action that usually is a legal action taken against somebody for, they didn't execute a contract that they were supposed to. So I now have to foreclose on them. Oh my God, it kills me when I hear pawnbrokers talk about foreclosures on loans. Stay away from that terminology. It just puts us back in with exactly what we don't want to be. Look, if we trace the lineage back of pawn shops, we all wanted to start using the word loans and be like a bank, right? We wanted to add credibility to the industry. And we wanted to be just like a bank. Look at me like a bank. Well, not so much anymore, right? That's a really bad scenario. We don't want to be in that mix. We're not that mix. Look, there's nowhere on anybody's pawn ticket does it say you're promising to give me my money back, right? There's no promise to repay. And there's no obligation. There's only two kinds of obligation, right? A moral and a legal,
yep.
Right? If there's another one, I'm unaware of it, but you have a moral obligation to do something or you have a legal obligation to do something. Neither one of those exists in a pawn, right? I mean, we don't have that. You have no obligation. So one of my favorite arguments to have with a lawmaker is, and this has happened, they'll say, well, how many times do people get their stuff back? And I'm like, in my shop, it's, about 85%. And they're like, oh my God, 15% lose their items. And I'm always like, well, no, they were compensated for it. No, I lose my car keys all the time. Nobody pays me, right? So, I mean, it's not the same thing. You can't compare it.
Yeah.
And they go, well, the pawn shop gives you nothing anyway for your stuff. That's another one that, I love to get the pushback for. And I'm like, okay, let's just look at this very simplistically, right? I make more the more I give somebody. So how is it advantageous for me to give that person as little as possible? Right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. This is just how, our image has been portrayed, and now we're in this, right? So we need to change how people think of us. Agreed. And that has to come from within. And we start by terminology. We're a pawn. I'm not a pawn loan. If you see, when I opened, my business was Arlington Jewelry and Loan. My village 20 years ago wouldn't let me put the 4-letter word up, right? Because the pawn, oh my God, neighbor's going to move out, right? So I had to put loan in my name. 20 years later, you can see my shop behind me, right? I'm a pawn shop. I'm a pawn shop. I am very proud to be a pawn shop. I don't need to be called loans to feel like I'm a banker or I'm respectable. Let's get over this, right? I'm a pawnbroker. I'm respectable. I'm heavily regulated. I help people on a daily basis. I do everything above board. What do I have to be ashamed of? Right?
Nothing. So
I think our terminology amongst ourselves in the industry starts to change. We have to start to change it, right? I always use this analogy also. You go to a dinner party, and 15 years ago, somebody says, what do you do for a living? I'm a used car salesman. Whoop, they turn around and walk away. Nobody wants to talk to a used car salesman. They all roll their eyes. They all have the image, right? Now, present day, what do? I'm a salesman at CarMax. Oh, you know what? My daughter just started driving, so we're looking for a Jeep. Do you have a Jeep? Yeah, here's my card. Come on by. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Right? They changed the industry. They changed how it's viewed. CarMax is used cars. I don't sell used Rolex. I sell pre-owned, right? Yeah. I mean, we have to change it. We have the power to change it. But we just need to do it collectively. And we need to do it every time we open our mouth to a lawmaker. I'm not calling it loans. It's just not. I'm not doing it. It's a pawn. It's a completely different beast.
Love that. Kelly, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show. For those of you who are listening, if you're in Illinois, you better be calling Kelly and saying thank you, as well as becoming a member if you're not. If you're a current member, thank you for being a member. Kelly, it takes 3 balls to lead an association. Many pawnbrokers think that they have balls, but they don't. It takes many and big ones to become the leader of an association. Thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do, because you're not just doing it for Illinois, you're doing it for all of the states, because if something happens in Illinois, it becomes a domino effect. If something
Without
happens
a
in
doubt.
California, Nevada, Florida, it becomes a domino effect for the whole country. So thank you so much for your service. Appreciate you, and hope to meet you in person.
Thank you. I'll see you at one of the conventions, I'm sure.
For sure, for sure. Everybody, stay tuned for the next episode of the Pawn Leaders Podcast. Also, don't forget to join us in the Pawn Leaders community. Just go to Facebook, type in Pawn Leaders Community. We pop up, get the invite, and have a conversation with hundreds of pawnbrokers who not only want to talk about if the guitar is real or if the purse is real, but they actually care about the pawn business and want to lead their business and the pawn industry as well.